Imagine lying awake at night. The house is quiet. The kind of quiet that feels almost too perfect. And then you hear it. Footsteps. Not outside. Not from the street. From somewhere, inside the walls. You tell yourself it's the old pipes. The wood expanding in the cold. You've said it so many times now that you almost believe it. But then the milk goes missing. The television changes channel by itself. A handprint appears on the window that faces the backyard, on the inside. And one afternoon, your father tears open part of the wall, and someone looks back. This is the true story of Daniel LaPlante, and of the Bowen family, and of the house that hid a secret no one saw coming. But before we get to what happened inside those walls, you need to understand something. This is not a ghost story. What lived inside that house was far more dangerous than any ghost. The year is 1987. The place is Townsend, Massachusetts. A quiet, unremarkable town about an hour northwest of Boston. The kind of town where everyone knows their neighbors, where kids ride bikes until dark, where the idea of something truly sinister feels far away. Daniel LaPlante was 17 years old. By all accounts, he was a troubled kid. His mother had died when he was very young. His father was largely absent. He had struggled in school, struggled to connect with people, struggled, by every measure, to belong anywhere. He had become obsessed with a girl named Tina Bowen. The two had spoken. Maybe dated briefly. Tina had ended whatever it was between them. And for most teenagers, that would have been the end of the story. For Daniel LaPlante, it was only the beginning. The Bowen family lived in a colonial-style home in Townsend. A large, older house with plenty of space. Plenty of rooms. And, as it would turn out, plenty of places to hide. Tina's father, Raymond Bowen, was a single parent raising Tina and her younger sister Annie. He worked hard. He trusted his home. He had no reason not to. No reason, yet. It started slowly, the way these things always do. A carton of milk in the refrigerator, half empty in the morning. Raymond Bowen assumed one of the girls had helped herself during the night. He didn't think much of it. Then Tina noticed that some of her things had been moved, just slightly. A hairbrush on the wrong side of the dresser. A book that she was sure she had left face down, now face up. She mentioned it to her father. He listened. He told her she was probably just tired, forgetting where she'd left things. Kids do that. Adults do that. Everyone does that. But then, the footsteps started. At night, when the house was supposed to be still, Tina and Annie could hear something moving. Not above them in the attic. Not outside on the porch. But within the walls. A shuffling. A slow, deliberate sound. Like someone trying very hard not to be heard, and almost succeeding. Raymond checked the house. He found nothing. He checked again. Still nothing. He put it down to the house settling. Old houses do that. The wood, the pipes, the structure responding to temperature changes. That's what he told himself. That's what he needed to believe. And here is where this story becomes something more than just one family's nightmare. Because when you spend time on the Reddit threads where people describe unexplained activity in their homes, you find that the Bowen experience is not as unique as it should be. One user wrote, "We kept finding food missing from our kitchen. Not a lot. A few crackers, half an orange, some leftover pasta. We thought it was rats. We set traps. Nothing. It went on for 3 months before we found the access panel in the basement ceiling had been opened. Someone had been using it as a bed." Another wrote, "My sister lived alone in a house in rural Ohio. She started noticing her shampoo bottle getting emptier faster than it should. Her toothbrush moved. A single wet towel left in the bathroom that she hadn't used. She called a plumber, thinking it was a pipe. It wasn't a pipe. These are not ghost stories. These are people who share one terrifying thing in common. They were not alone in their homes. And they didn't know it. The phenomenon even has a name: phrogging, derived from the word frog. Because, like a frog in slowly heating water, the victim rarely notices until it's already too late. The footsteps became harder to ignore. Then, the television. One evening, the Bowen family was sitting in the living room when the channel changed. No one was holding the remote. Raymond picked it up and changed it back. A moment later, it changed again. He assumed the remote had a fault. He checked the batteries. He replaced them. It happened again. Then came the voices. Faint, muffled, impossible to locate. Coming from somewhere behind the walls. Not one specific wall, but seeming to move from room to room, as if whatever was inside the house was following them. Tina started refusing to sleep in her room. Annie slept with the light on. Raymond Bowen began to wonder, seriously, and for the first time, whether his house was haunted. And then they found the messages, scratched into the paint on the inside of a closet wall. Crude letters, a name, and beneath it, a statement so simple and so horrifying that Tina later said she couldn't breathe when she read it. I'm still here. Raymond Bowen called the police. The police came. They searched the house. They found no one. They left. And that night, the footsteps returned. One person on Reddit described something hauntingly similar. We had messages too, not scratched into anything, typed and printed on paper, left in different places around the apartment. The first one just said, "Thank you for leaving the window open. We lived on the 4th floor. We still don't know how they got in. We moved out within the week." It was during the winter of 1987. Raymond Bowen, exhausted, frustrated, and, if we're being honest, beginning to feel like he was losing his mind, decided to do something drastic. He was going to find the source of the sounds himself. Every cavity, every crawl space, every possible hollow space behind the walls. He started in the attic. Nothing. He moved to the basement. Nothing. And then he came to a section of the wall on the upper floor. A wall that, when he pressed his ear against it, seemed to produce just the faintest sound. A warmth. A presence. He grabbed a tool. He began to pull back the drywall. And there, in the dark space between the walls of his own home, was Daniel LaPlante, 17 years old, living inside the walls, surviving on stolen food, watching, listening, moving through the house at night through access panels and crawl spaces that Raymond never knew existed. He had been there for weeks. LaPlante was taken into custody. He was charged with breaking and entering, criminal harassment, and a number of related offenses. He was a minor. He was processed through the juvenile system. The Bowen family never truly recovered from what had happened in that house. The violation of it. Not just the crime itself, but the weeks of being watched, listened to, lived alongside without their knowledge, is a psychological wound that doesn't close easily. As one commenter on Reddit put it, people always ask, "Why didn't you notice?" As if it's simple. But these people are careful. They eat a little, not a lot. They move only when you sleep. They learn your schedule. The signs are always there in hindsight. That's the worst part. In hindsight, you see all of it. Daniel LaPlante's story did not end with the Bowen house. In 1988, less than a year after being removed from the walls of that home in Townsend, LaPlante committed crimes of a far more serious nature. He was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms in prison. He remains incarcerated to this day. We won't go further into those crimes here. They're documented, they're a matter of public record, and they are not the focus of this story. The focus of this story is the warning that the Bowen case represents. Because the family saw the signs. They felt them. They reported them. and they were not believed. Not because the police were incompetent, but because what was happening inside that house was simply too strange, too extreme, for the average human mind to accept as real. A teenager living inside the walls, eating their food, moving their things, writing on their walls, watching their lives from just inches away, separated by nothing more than a thin layer of drywall and disbelief. Phrogging. It's not a term most people have heard, but the cases are more documented than you'd think. In 2008, a man in Connecticut discovered a homeless woman had been living in a compartment above his closet for over a week, eating his food, using his bathroom, sleeping above him while he slept. In 2014, in Japan, police arrested a woman who had been secretly living in a man's apartment for nearly a year, surviving in a tiny storage space, emerging only when he left for work. In 2022, a family in North Carolina found evidence that someone had been living in a crawl space beneath their home for what investigators estimated to be several months. These are not legends. These are not urban myths. These are documented cases. People who slipped into the margins of someone else's life and lived there, invisible, until the moment they weren't. So the next time you hear a sound in the wall, and you almost dismiss it, remember the Bowen family. Remember what was living just on the other side of the wall. And maybe, just maybe, check.